Okay, this is chapter 4.1, the percent equation, and the equation is sort of an important thing. It's one of the things that we're going to talk about first. We need to kind of learn this. Um, they've got A equals P times W, and A stands for part of the whole. And P stands for percent in fraction or decimal form. So P is just percent, but it could be a fraction or it could be a decimal. And that's something we're going to have to talk about. And the W stands for the whole. So A is for part of the whole, P is for percent, and W is for the whole. And this right here is something that you just need to hang on to. This is important. Muy importante, or something like that. Okay, so let's talk about it. They want us to, if we want to find part of a number, finding part of a number, find part of a number. Okay, so like example number 1, what is 24% of 50? 24% of 50, and it's important to note that of is always times. It's a multiplication. Of is equal to times in math, generally. Pretty much always. So we write our equation down. We start with that. A equals P times W, and then we start thinking about what this is 24%. So we can write 24% for P. And the whole is 50. So times 50, and then the A is the part of the whole. So we're finding part of a whole. So the A is our variable. That's the thing we don't know in this equation. Now the other thing we have to understand is how to write 24% as both a decimal and or a fraction. And if you look at page 160, that shows you at the very top of the page. It shows you that 4% is the same as 4 over 100 because a percent is a piece of 100. But that can also be written as 0.04. This is 4 hundredths, and so is this, because we're in the tenths, hundredths place. This is the ones place here, tenths place, and the hundredths place. So this is 0 and, the decimal always is called and, 4 hundredths. So it looks like 4 hundredths. These are equal. Or the other example they give is 25%, and that can be written as 25 over 100. It can also be written as 0.25. Okay, so we can write it out of 100, make it a percent that way, or we can use a decimal and make it a percent that way. So 24% is going to turn into A equals 24 over 100 times 50. Or we could write that A is 0.24, 24 hundredths, times 50. I'm going to put, no, I don't think I want that X there. I think I just need to make sure that my dot is not looking like a decimal. Or I could use a parenthesis. So this one is calculator. It might be that you could do it in your head, or you can, do 24 times 50 this way, add the decimal back in after you finish. There's nothing wrong with this, but personally, sometimes fractions work better, and they're what I like to use if possible, because if I remember to simplify before I multiply, I can change 50 100ths into 1/2. So this gets to be rewritten 24 times 1, 2 times 1. So A is equal to 24 halves, which is 24 divided by 2, which is 12. So 24% of 50 is 12. And if we were to just look at a bar that shows 50, if this is 50, then 100% of 50 is right here, and that would be 50. And 50% of 50 would be here, which would be 25. Does that make sense? 25 would be half of that, and 150 would be 100%. And if we were to cut it up into quarters, then we'd have to cut 25 in half, which is like 12.5. And this would be 25%. We're looking for 24%, so 12.5 kind of makes sense to be 25%, and 24% is 12. So there's some logic. We look at our answer, we make sense of it. All right, let's do another one. Finding a percent. So if we're going to find a percent, okay, they're going to give us different information. They're going to give us, this is example number 2, 9.5 is what percent, question mark percent, what percent, 9.5 is what percent of 25? And we're going to use the same formula. We're still going to write it down. A is equal to P times W. And we're going to see that 9.5 is the percent. So that's this. That's A, because A stands for what percent. 9.5 is what percent. So we just fill 9.5 in here. We don't know the percent, but we do know the whole was 25. So the whole is 25, so it's P times 25. Now it would be better to rewrite that as 25P. So if I were to change and come over here and write 9.5 is 25P, then we use algebra to solve for P. And again, this we're going to divide by 25, divide by 25. And this is a calculator exercise because you're going to have to do 9.5 divided by 25. And that's a little bit harder. So you just you grab your calculator. We're going to do this way. Let's see if I can find my dashboard. It's 9.5. You need to have a calculator with you, and a lot of you guys are not choosing to carry one. There are times when you need one. 9.5 divided by 25 is 0.38. So P is equal to 0.38. So that's the percentage. So if I were to rewrite that as an actual percentage, instead of 0.38, it would be 38%. And it's important to be able to go back and forth between a decimal equivalency of a percent and an actual percent. You just move the decimal over twice that direction, and it's that 38%. And if we looked at it, 9.5 is 38% of 25. That kind of makes sense. If we had 25 here, 100% would be 25. And 50% of 25 would be that 12.5 number again. And so 9%, 9.5 is a smaller number than 50%, and we got 38%, and that is smaller. So there is some logic to that. 38% is going to be somewhere over here. And so that would be less than 12.5. Apparently it's 9.5. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that that's a little bit tougher than the first example. The third example, we're going to find a whole number. Or somehow find a whole. So this time we're still going to write down our formula. A equals P times W. I want you to do that each time. And then we look at the question, and it says 39 is 52% of, remember that of means times, what number? Of what number? That's supposed to be a number sign. I was running out of room. So our A, our percent is 52%. times the whole number. That's the part we don't know. We don't know what W is, so we don't know what the whole is. 39 is some percent of that whole number, so that 39 goes over here. And that's kind of the difficult part, is figuring out, excuse me, figuring out where to put the numbers. 39 is 52% of some bigger number. Now, say this were 40. 40 is 50% of what number? This is something we could do in our head. 40 is half, because 50% is half of some number. 40 is half of 80, so W is 80. In this case, this is sort of like an estimate. And it makes sense to think about an estimate before or after we do a problem to make sense of it. So 39 is 52% of what number? And again, we're going to have 39 here. And we might decide to use a decimal this time. We could use a fraction, or we could use a decimal. The book is using a decimal. So it's 0.52 times W. And then we have to divide by 0.52 on both sides to find out what W is. Now, whenever you divide by a decimal, something smaller than 1, your number actually gets big. Say we were dividing by 1/2 again, like on this one. We divide by 0.5. We would get twice as many. It's like taking 40 cookies and cutting them in half. We'd have 80 pieces. So 80 would be why W is equal to 80 here. So when we divide by 0.2, it's going to grow. So that's just something you need to kind of stick in your hat. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. That looks funny. I guess that's close enough. All right, so I'm going to go like this, and we're doing 39 divided by 0.52. Calculator again. 39 divided by 0.52 is 75. And if you can see, the 75 is the answer. W is 75. What we did was 39 divided by 0.52 on a calculator. 39 over 0.52 is like that, equals 75. So W is equal to 75. And that makes sense with the way that we estimated it at the beginning. Okay, this gives you plenty of challenges for this lesson. Not too hard. Just have to make sure that you can change your percentage into either a fraction or a decimal. You'd be able to use a calculator, be able to divide both sides, use algebra skills. We're putting it all together. You guys are really learning.